Hey guys, Suge and Allen here.
We are here at Hearst Castle. We're here for the Cottages and Kitchens
Kitchen
tour.
tour.
On Cottages and Kitchens, we will be focusing on the smaller guest cottages, or the smallest and the largest, I should say. We will be spending a little time in the main house as well. We'll only get a couple spots along the way where we see the front of Casa Grande, so I'll pause at those spots so we can get any photos that we want there. Feel free to ask me questions as we go. Questions actually help me out as far as what you're interested in hearing about. If it's something you stump me with, I'll have the answer for you next time you visit. Now, with all that said, anybody have questions for me before we get going? All right, why don't we head up, we'll take a look at the Neptune pool, and then we'll make our way up to the main house from there. This end is 10 feet deep. The opposite end is 3 feet deep. And then the architect has kind of cleverly, especially from that end, she's hidden the depth, see the angle of change from one end to the other. So this is actually the third version of the Neptune pool. 105 feet long, it's 58 feet wide. Or you can dive in here. 45,000 gallons.
Beautiful.
But the prior two versions of this pool, 1928 and 1924, this one was finished in 1936. We can still see the size of the second Neptune pool. It's the oval in the base of the current pool. The same tile that's at our feet, made of serpentine, is what's used in the bottom of the pool as well for those designs.
Water going down. By 2013, it was looking at about 5,000 gallons of water.
Whispers in my head, what you gonna do? 선택의 기로에 왠지 견내려 해 쉽지 않아도 진실한 나만 내
1958, they kept access to the two pools after hours and ownership over the wine in the wine cellar. So technically the bottles we'll see that still have wine in them are owned by the Hearst family. I might make an argument now that what's in them is no longer wine, it's vinegar, but they do still technically own it. The north here, and then our view of the ocean is blocked by Casa del Sol, but we'll get a good view of the mountains when we go inside Casa del Monte, and I'd argue the best view on the entire property when we go inside Casa del Mar a little farther along. So the main house, to get some context, began in 1922. Construction started in 1922. The first habitable space wasn't ready until 1926. It is 68,500 square feet.
Wow.
Right? The guest cottage we'll be looking at is 2,500 square feet. Speaking for myself, I'd be very happy with a 2,500 square foot home, but might be too much even, but 68,000 square feet. So we're going to head into the wine cellar.
Okay guys, we're getting ready to head down into the wine cellar.
Thank you.
You got it.
It feels good in here.
So the wine cellar is made of old shipping crates, some of which had wine in them and others that had artifacts in. Over the course of the 28 years of construction on sites, 95 train cars worth of artifacts were brought up that road you took to get here.
Wow.
So an immense amount of engineering just getting all the material here. And then for the wine cellar, They're using some of the crates, but obviously this isn't a space they're really looking to share with guests. It's intentionally spare. The wine is the main feature, along with some of the cocktail mixers and other spirits in here. Hearst had a particular affinity when he was young for champagne. When he attended Harvard, he had a pet alligator that he called Champagne Charlie. And then there are letters from him to his father when he was in his teens, getting his various pets to drink champagne and then recording their behavior after he fed them champagne. So to say that he was privileged, right, is a little bit of an understatement. But you'll notice there are big vault doors here in the cellar, and those were actually utilized. So especially toward the middle of his life, Mr. Hearst did not like intoxication. He found public intoxication to be rude. So if you were a guest here during this golden age of Hollywood, when everybody's a drinker, right? You were limited to 2 watered-down cocktails a night when you were visiting, yeah. And then they would lock up the alcohol for the rest of the evening, right? That said, he considered beer to be medicinal. So beer was available 24/7, but other cocktails would be cut off early in the evening.
All right, we're back outside again. Did you have a couple of drinks?
I wish we could have, but I'm sure it's all vinegar now.
Yeah, not
It's
looking
so
for
old.
vinegar today.
So most of the buildings on site have Spanish treatments, Spanish inspiration. So the tile we see around the top of the roof line was designed by Julia Morgan, but inspired by actual Spanish tile. It was fired at California Faience in Berkeley, a company that no longer exists. But the tile at our feet is also designed by the architect as well. So she is multi-talented and very focused. She doesn't like other people to finish the spaces that she's designed. So she is not just the architect, she's also the landscape architect, the interior designer, and the construction foreman. She's hiring the people who are ultimately doing the building on site, but running this operation mostly from her offices in San Francisco, and then visiting on weekends. So she'll ride the train down overnight, stay here for the weekend, and then ride the train back overnight and continue working on Monday. She's very prolific. So the entirety of this property, which has 16 structures, she considers to be one project, and it's project number 503 out of over 700 she worked on building. So if you haven't read much about Julia Morgan, I highly recommend. She's a fascinating figure in the history of architecture in the United States. She's also a pioneer in the use of steel reinforced concrete. So concrete was used by the Romans, but essentially lost to technology through the Dark Ages, and then resumed use in the early 20th century among various architects, among whom is Julia Morgan. A few of the buildings she designed survived the San Francisco earthquake in 1906, which was a big deal. And so her notoriety in the wake of that quake, helping rebuild and retrofit the city for future earthquakes, made her famous. And that's part of what she instituted here as well, was earthquake-proof construction. If we look at the ratio of steel to concrete in our buildings here, it outpaces current California earthquake code.
Well, I think steel is steel's a more expensive product than steel. Steel is,
I'm sorry. This is like a scary little picture. Double bed, shoes. I love that, like, shower mother.
sorry, tomb, tomb, B.
I think we're gonna like. I think it's right.
Looks like a fairly modern
It
bathroom.
does.
Oh. And another one. Shower too.
Doesn't actually care about what she wants to show us.
So each of the guest cottages is named after its view. This one has a view of the San Simeon mountain range, so Casa del Monte. The mulligans, those decorations around the windows, are typically one-piece original antique Renaissance era, and then the rest is plaster reproduction work. The ceilings are also plaster reproductions of actual ceilings from Spanish churches. So in this case, I find one of the creepiest ceilings on site. It has the different cherub faces peeking down at us.
That is kind of creepy.
So it is actual gilding. So they would install plaster sections about 20 inches on a side. Square sections, they'd attach them to the steel reinforced concrete, and then they paint it and then gild it after it's painted. So the piano in the corner is a Wurlitzer Apollo reproducing piano. I'd never heard of a reproducing piano before working here. Everybody's heard of a player piano, right? With a mechanism that allows you to play a piece on a paper scroll. It's a mechanical piece with steady rhythm and dynamic. The reproducing mechanism is similar, but it plays a live recording. So it has dynamic change and is representative of an actual performance. So first, so if we weren't satisfied with our cherubs in the last room, there are more in this ceiling. Just I don't know if it's a direct copy. I suspect they switch around some of the faces so they're not all in the same positions. And then the mulligan in this room is also interesting. So one of the two is the actual antique. The other is a reproduction. Anybody want to guess which is which? So I'm not absolutely sure, but I'm pretty sure the one on the left is the original. So you reproduce the other one in plaster. You know, I'm not aware of any hauntings, but maybe I'm just not sensitive enough. So I've never had an experience. The people that ask about that would be the collections team or the security team who lock the houses up at night. But yeah, I don't know. When I'm agnostic about ghosts, right? But in my agnosticism, I think of them, I interpret ghosts as sort of a concentration of energy left over from bad experiences, right? Yeah. I think people here are having a great time, for the most part.
I feel that. I would.
That makes sense.
It's just odd because it's so bulky, but it's so small.
Yeah.
Like, it's bulky, but it's
Everybody can go to that little lamp on the desk there with the Chinese carving on it. It's made of a stone called carnelian. First,
Honestly, he probably just like didn't like it very much, and then like he wanted to look at it.
I wonder if this is my masterpiece.
love the landscaping.
Yeah, they do a great job.
That's a generous interpretation. So I think his opinions about alcohol came in part from experiences he's had while attending Harvard. So he's a well-funded student, right? His allowance is the equivalent of about $11,000 a month
Yeah.
today. And he's throwing lavish parties and pulling pranks and just, he eventually gets booted out of Harvard for not attending class. And when they give him the opportunity to return, he decides he's not interested. But he did, that's where he sort of got involved in newspaper as a business. He was the business editor for the Harvard Lampoon. But he also witnessed a few of his friends sort of fall to alcoholism during that time, partly as the result of alcohol he was providing them. So I think he had a sensitivity to it in that sense. He didn't like drunkenness because he'd seen some people who couldn't climb out of the pit he helped them dig. I'm going to ask the last person through this door to pull it shut behind us. It is a little bit heavy, so just be gentle with it.
Oh, wow, that's the staircase.
So this back bedroom would have been Millicent Hearst's wife's bedroom when they lived here together. But fairly quickly, Hearst and Millicent separate because he begins dating Marion Davies. He'd already been dating her, I think, since about 1915. So that comes to a head. Millicent Hearst moves into their East Coast estate, which is about this side. It's called St. John's. She lives on the East Coast. He lives here with Marion Davies and moves up into the third floor of Casa Grande. They did move back down here, though, and we'll talk about that in the next bedroom we see.
These dogs have faces of men. Where's the lion? That's a person's face. Risky.
Looks like a modern bathtub. That's weird.
So this bedroom, Marion Davies and Hearst share toward the end of his life. So he started building here in his mid to late 50s. This guest cottage was complete 4 years later, but by 1926-27 he moved up into the main house where he lived with Marion Davies until 1945. In 1945 he started having heart trouble. It was hard to keep him warm. So they moved down here to this guest cottage together into one of the rooms that he and his wife shared and had both their bedrooms in the same space until he left the property for the last time in 1947. He ultimately died in Beverly Hills near Marion Davies' home in 1951. He was 88 years old. So this is the last space he occupied before leaving the property that last time.
I would argue that to have something like this, we're probably less.
glimpse of the view, we're going to see even better from the floor below. This room is almost all plaster reproduction work, except for the columns. Those are actual antique Italian columns, 17th century. And then almost everything else we see is plaster reproduction work. So concrete, the walls are concrete behind there. And they don't bother to add extra decor when they're going to hang the fabric over it. Doorways at the back just lead into the bedrooms behind. So this is Hearst's bedroom when he first lives here. Yeah, it's an Italian mantle, 16th century. So you can almost always tell when it's one of Hearst's rooms because it'll be darker. He likes dark, heavy furniture, a little more Gothic in his personal taste. They'll always have a writing desk, usually with letterhead that identifies where on the property it is. So this guest cottage would have letterhead that said Cadell Mar on it. Instead of a bedroom at the back is his office, which we'll see in a few moments. Two icons he's predominantly obsessed with, at least on this property, are the Madonna and Child. So there are a relief of the Madonna and Child above the bed and one above the mantelpiece. And Napoleon Bonaparte, so there's a relief of Napoleon on the wall here as well. We'll make our way back out of this house and down to the lower floor after we see the office here.
Look at that narrow stairway.
That's what I was looking at. What did you say was downstairs?
That's where we're headed. So it's called the lower loggia, and it has a sitting room that looks like a chapel, and then a space that used to be open air, but they modified for viewing the view down below.
Okay.
So we'll see that in just a sec.
There's no way Hearst could have gone down them stairs. He must have used that
Because
elevator, I
Hearst
guess.
was a tall guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, and a big guy.
You know what they say, don't brag about what you have. Be careful and be humble, otherwise you should be ready to stumble. You know what they say, 자신감이 없니? 왜 당당하게 살지를 못해? Keep walking your way.
I think the butterfly.
Uh-oh. Closed it.
We probably bought it at auction in New York, and then it would have made its way back home through the Panama Canal. So the staircases come down right there. Little chapel space. This is technically a sitting room. It doesn't really feel like one.
Okay, I can't imagine Hearst could go down those stairs.
No, I mean he's my height, but plus about 80 pounds.
Yeah.
So I doubt he was using those staircases. He probably by that point, I mean he did live in this house, but he's probably mostly staying upstairs.
Right. Man.
Or walking outside to come down.
Yeah. Wow.
To the air, but it gets so windy that I think they enclosed it pretty quickly. This is actual gilding, so it's gilded iron. They are antique iron features that were gilded by Ed Trinkeller. The two statues outside, the Golden Girls, are bronze that's been gilded as well. So those two fountains are currently not functioning, but they're undergoing conservation, so they may be back running in the next year or two.
Keep walking your way, don't look back. 너만의 길이야. Even when you fall, don't look back. 사실은 말이야. Nobody knows. No.
So our next room is going to be the kitchen. This is where the kitchen that provided food for the entire property.
Okay, guys, we are now entering the kitchen.
I'm hungry. You hungry? Let's go see what we can get to eat.
Let's see what Hearst got.
We would have between 6 and 10 staff, one of whom would have a late shift, which would go all the way till about 3 a.m. If you wanted food after 3 a.m. as a guest, you could access it. There was one fridge that had ingredients to make a sandwich. So you could access that fridge after hours. But the rest of the time, you're subject to ordering through the kitchen staff, the butler. So in the morning, from about 9 to 11 a.m., breakfast was served. So you could get whatever you wanted to eat for breakfast. Lunch was typically a buffet served in the refectory, and then dinner you were meant to all join together and have dinner in the main room. So in answer to your question about what the rest of the house looks like, it's hard to describe, but the main bottom floor is all huge rooms that are mostly decorated like Renaissance era palaces or Gilded Age Renaissance revival. So essentially it's kind of like we saw in a little of the guest cottages, almost overwhelming the amount of decor that there is. Very early refrigerators, so they're modified ice boxes, which was what people used to store their perishables in this era. Those huge compressors on top were cutting-edge technology for the time. So in 1920, when construction began on buildings on site, 1% of the country had running water. So to have bedrooms with plumbed-in bathrooms was a big deal, and then to have things like refrigeration and electricity, also a very big deal. The first power bill for the property, November of 1924, when they contracted with San Joaquin Power Company to hook you into the California grid. That first power bill was $1,342. So the equivalent of about $30,000 today. And everything in this kitchen is electric. There's a kegerator in the middle of the room with a compressor to keep the kegs cold. It had one dark beer like Guinness or Bass and a German lager. And those would have been available, like we talked about at the start of the tour, throughout the day and night. The stove system is custom designed for the space. It is all electric.
Those cookies look delicious. So does that bread.
Might not drink the milk though.
I'll pass on the milk.
Yeah, makes it grind yourself. Yeah.
You want me to shut that door, go ahead, or?
We're going to head out and also take care of it.
Absolutely.
We don't mind coming in so Anthony can get by, guys.
Appreciate you folks. We're gonna sneak past right here. Thank you so much. And just watch your steps, sir, because it is a bit of a decline down. There we go.
So in the room next door, the morning room, for those of you who were on the grand rooms tour earlier, the fireplace in there never seemed to draw properly. And they had multiple technicians out to work on it. They could never get the smoke to go up the chimney. As guides, we think that it's this range hood that was causing the problem. pulling air from underneath the doors and smoke all the way out of that fireplace. So in a moment we're going to head outside. We'll get a look in the back courtyard here at some of the other spots in the house, and then we'll make our way down the indoor Roman pool. When Julia Morgan would visit on weekends, she would work out of this shed as well. If you look at the front, the acorn woodpeckers have been using it as their little pantry. So the exterior of the house, you'll notice, does not have the same limestone treatment as the front central portion of the house does. And that's just because they never got around to finishing it. So we could make an argument that he might never finish.
So this is where Julia Morgan would actually come sit and work.
Yeah, as many times we've done this tour, we've never seen this before.
You see her blueprint drawings.
Huh.
Pretty neat. You learn something different every time you
Yeah, yeah, we were talking about that.
All of those were drawn up but never enacted. So from here we'll be making our way down to the indoor Roman pool. Indoor Roman pool. Julia Morgan argued against this plan because the flat roof would tend to leak. Hearst insisted upon it, so she enacted his wishes, but it started leaking almost immediately, I think within a decade of being constructed. Originally it was one tennis court with a hillside underneath it. They dug out the hillside, expanded it to 2 courts, and built the pool underneath. So once we get down there, it's hard to talk in the space. It's very echoey because it's going through repair at the moment. The acoustic tile that was on the ceiling has all been removed because it's made of cork. And as the ceiling leaked, the cork was absorbing the moisture and then dripping out this tannic dark tea onto the statuary down below. So all that cork has been removed. We're going to go through a process of sealing the ceiling, and then we'll put the cork back in. But that's probably 3 or 4 years out. So we'll still get to see the space, but it's just harder to talk in there. So when we get down inside, there are over 2.5 million individual tiles made in Murano, Italy. 350,000 of them are gold leaf, 22 and 24 karat gold leaf, fused into glass. So we'll be walking on that golden tile on our way to the bus. The motif is underwater scenes when you're above the water surface in the pool. At the base of the pool is the night sky. So it's an inverted reality designed by Julia Morgan and Camille Salon. I just look at these tiles and imagine having to place each one by hand.
So I think he said earlier when they used to heat the pools, this one was heated until
up to 85
80,
degrees. 80, 85.
That gold chips, gold paint.
Yes, we're actually walking on gold.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So the Hearst still have access to it. I've never witnessed that. In that area, they did. It was heated in that area. So it would have been 75, 85 degrees.
All right, guys, that is it for the cottages and kitchen
Kitchens,
tour.
yes.
So that kitchen make you hungry? That corn on the cob, I don't know if you spotted that.
Not the milk, but I spotted the lobster tail.
Oh, I knew you'd
Yeah,
see
I saw
that.
that.
Darn lobster tail. All right, so that's it for this adventure. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell, and put some comments below. Have you been here before? What'd you think of the tour? Is it something you'd like to do? And with that said, we will see you on our next adventure.
Bye, guys.
Whispers in my head, what you gonna do? 선택의 기로에 난 지켜내려 해 쉽지 않아도 진실한 나만 내